What if the next medical breakthrough rewrote what it means to be you? Imagine a world where a failing body could be replaced while your thoughts, memories, and identity continue intact. It sounds like science fiction, a prophecy from a future we're not supposed to see yet. But for decades, a handful of surgeons have pursued one of the boldest ideas in medicine, transplanting a human head onto a new body. An Italian neurosurgeon sparked global headlines by proposing and preparing for such a procedure. Over the years, his team claimed partial successes in the lab, connecting a donor head to a donor body in cadavers and then running electrical tests to confirm that major connections were re-established. In their telling, they weren't just moving tissue, they were restoring pathways. Experiments on animals, including a monkey, suggested that, at least in principle, you could preserve a brain, connect a spinal cord with specialized techniques, and maintain circulation long enough to test reflexes. Meanwhile, research groups in the UK and elsewhere have explored related technologies, micro-suturing, nerve fusion methods, robotics, and advanced imaging, to push the limits of what might one day be surgically possible. Does that mean a living human head transplant has been done? No, there is no verified, peer-reviewed, successful living human procedure. But proponents insist it's only a matter of engineering, precision, and time, arguing that intelligence, robotics, and algorithmic planning could help align and reconnect hundreds of nerves and vessels with machine-level accuracy. Plans for such a surgery often cite an 18-hour operating window, swarms of surgical teams, hypothermic protection for the brain, and even special biopolymers intended to fuse nerve endings. All this raises deep questions, technical, ethical, and spiritual. Technically, could it work? Ethically, who is the person afterward? Spiritually, where is the soul, and what does faith say about crossing a line this dramatic? Consider a real person who once volunteered to be the first, a Russian man with Werdnig-Hoffmann disease, a severe form of spinal muscular atrophy. His mind was bright and intact, but his body could not follow. If a head transplant were possible, he believed it might grant him a functioning body and a new lease on life. That immediately forces a question. If someone has a healthy brain, but a failing body, and another person has a healthy body, but irreversible brain failure, why is swapping any different, morally or medically, than transplanting a heart, a lung, or a pair of corneas? We already accept organ transplants that were once unthinkable. In the mid-20th century, people said a heart was too vital to move, that no one could survive without a heartbeat, that you could never keep the brain alive while replacing the engine of life. Today, however, heart transplants have survival rates that would have been called miraculous a century ago. Even so, head transplantation feels different. Surgeons who oppose it ask, how can you possibly repair the spinal cord's complex web of connections? And if you can't, are you risking a living person's life on a promise you can't keep? The more optimistic researchers point to the speed of technological change. They argue that what took a decade in the last century might take a year or a month today. Robotic arms can suture thinner vessels than a human hand can see. AI can plan cut-by-cut steps, predicting tension, angle, and alignment down to micrometers. New materials like polyethylene glycol have been studied as potential fusing agents for nerve fibers. None of this makes the leap trivial. It just means that leaps once considered impossible have started to look like engineering problems rather than metaphysical walls. But medicine isn't only a question of can we, it is also a question of should we and when. Faith traditions, including biblical perspectives, have long grappled with life, death, and the sanctity of the human body. So, is something like a head transplant biblically permissible? Let's start with what is already broadly accepted. The Bible does not prohibit organ donation in general, and many authorities encourage saving lives wherever possible. Transplants of non-vital organs, such as corneas from the deceased, are typically accepted. The debate intensifies with vital organs, especially when the donor's heart is still beating at the time of retrieval due to machines sustaining circulation. Here, the key question is, when does life end? Medicine uses definitions such as brain death or brainstem death. Scripturally, many authorities tie life to the breath, noting Genesis. God breathed the breath of life into Adam's nostrils. Breath, our capacity to draw it and sustain it, becomes a sign of a soul's presence in the body. From that perspective, when the brain centers that govern spontaneous respiration are irreversibly destroyed, the soul has departed, even if machines can keep the heart pumping for a time. This view, accepted by many, though not all, religious authorities, permits transplanting vital organs only after irreversible loss of autonomous breathing. In other words, you must never take a life to save a life. The Talmud puts it starkly. Who says your blood is redder than his? You cannot play God by killing one person to preserve another. Apply that to our scenario. If the body donor has irreversibly lost the capacity to breathe, if the soul has, in religious terms, departed, then their body may ethically serve to save another. If not, it may not. The line is bright. Consent does not erase it. A living patient cannot ethically authorize their own killing for an experimental surgery. Sacredness of life is not negotiable. That helps us with the ethics, but what about identity? If Maria's head is placed on Pedro's body, who is the person who wakes up? Where is the soul? The Bible and classical thought teach that the human being is made in the image of God. That resemblance is not physical, it is spiritual. Your essence is your soul. The body, Scripture tells us, is a garment, as Job describes being clothed in skin and flesh. Clothes matter. They keep you warm, express who you are, but they are not you. So what happens if a head is moved to a new body? In this framework, the soul's primary seat in the physical world is associated with the brain, the command center from which thought, will, memory, and intention flow. The soul commands the body through that center. If a person's brain remains, their personal identity remains. The body becomes a new garment, different, perhaps even transformative in what it allows that person to do, but it does not replace the self. This is not as distant from everyday life as it sounds. Our bodies change constantly. Every cell is replaced. Organs can be transplanted. Limbs can be lost or restored with prosthetics. Through all of it, our sense of I persists. We don't say, I became someone else when we recover from an illness or receive a kidney. We say, I am more myself because now we can do what our purpose demands. But what about the resurrection of the dead mentioned in Ezekiel, Zechariah, and Daniel? Doesn't swapping bodies tangle the future? No. Resurrection is, by its nature, miraculous. The God who restores life to dust is not constrained by our present anatomy. People who died centuries ago have long since returned to the earth. Their organs are gone. Resurrection does not require God to track original parts like a mechanic. It is God granting life to whom He wills. If He can fashion a heart where none remains, He can just as easily restore a body to a soul that wore more than one garment. Here is a practical concern, though: risk. Suppose a surgeon attempts the first living head transplant and, predictably, the patient dies. The body donor was truly deceased by religious criteria, but the recipient was alive. Even if he consented, a failed attempt could be considered the taking of a life, not the saving of one. That risk is not abstract, it is central. Historically, Heart transplants only became broadly accepted when the procedure's success rates rose and the criteria for donor death became clear and carefully guarded. Until then, caution was not cowardice, it was reverence for life. So where does that leave us today? On a frontier. We have powerful tools: robotics, high-resolution imaging, machine learning, novel biomaterials, ready to serve human healing. We have a moral compass that insists on boundaries. Do not kill to cure. Do not cross the line where the soul has not yet departed. And we have a spiritual truth that anchors identity beyond the body. You are not your flesh. You are your soul wearing flesh. By the way, I want to hear from you. Where do you think your you lives? Your brain, your body, or your soul? If a head transplant became safe tomorrow, would it change who a person is? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if this kind of deep dive, where science, ethics, and faith meet, speaks to you, tap like and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Back to the operating room of the future. A living head transplant, if it ever becomes real, would demand choreography at the edge of possibility. Surgeons would cool the brain to protect it from oxygen shortage. Teams would cut and label vessels and nerves with exquisite precision. Machines would maintain circulation. Robotic micro-instruments might align spinal tracts under augmented reality guidance. Surgeons could apply chemical agents to encourage nerve fusion, then stimulate pathways and watch, waiting for response. Hours of suturing, hours of quiet, careful hope. If anything fails, blood pressure, clotting, oxygenation, the mind at the center is at risk. No one pretends this is simple. The question is whether it is meaningful, orderly, and safe enough to attempt on a living person, not only medically, but morally. From a biblical vantage point, the frame remains consistent. Saving a life is paramount. Exploiting a life is forbidden. If the donor's life has ended by the standard of irreversible loss of respiration, and if the recipient's survival odds are reasonably high, like the threshold heart transplants eventually achieved, then the door opens. If the donor is not truly deceased, or if success is a remote hope, the door closes. That line does not move because technology is impressive. It moves only when the moral facts change, when we can say with integrity that we are saving a life without taking one. There is also a life lesson here, perhaps the most important of all. We live under the illusion that we are our bodies, that youth, strength, and appearance define us. But bodies betray us, and they always will. If the day comes when medicine can trade an uncooperative body for a cooperative one, it will only underline a truth that faith has said for millennia. Your essence is not your muscle, your skin, or even your heartbeat. Your essence is your soul, your will, your love, your conscience, your relationship with God. Change the garment and the person remains. In fact, the person might finally be able to do what they were meant to do: walk, serve, create, embrace, because the garment fits. To summarize the roadmap, first, knowledge is a gift. If technology opens doors to heal without crossing sacred boundaries, we are meant to walk through them with humility. Second, those boundaries matter. We may not redefine death to suit convenience, and we may not risk lives recklessly. Third, identity is spiritual at its core. If the world one day witnesses a successful head transplant, expect this: the person who wakes will still be the same self who went to sleep, now clothed in a different body, called to the same mission, with perhaps a greater ability to fulfill it. Whether or not such a surgery ever moves from rumor and rehearsal to reality, the questions it forces us to ask are already changing us. What is life? What is a person? What is a body for? Ask them now, while the operating room is still quiet. Because when the door finally opens, and one day it might, you will want to know exactly where you stand.